Hello, everyone. Welcome to our conversations with women in public health leadership. I am Dr. Charity, founder, the Next 100 Initiative. Today we have Angie Bannerman Ankoma. She's the Vice President and Executive Director of Equity Leadership at the Rhode Island Foundation in Providence, Rhode Island, United States. In this role, Angie oversees the professional development of leaders of color in Rhode Island. She previously served as the Executive Vice President, Director of Community Investment at United Way of Rhode Island, where she directed grant making, public policy, government relations, research, and evaluation. Angie once worked at the Rhode Island Department of Health as the founding co-director of the Health Equity Institute, where she oversaw the implementation of leading priorities on health equity. Welcome, Angie. Thank you so much for joining us to inspire the emerging generation of public health leaders across the continent. And your voice is so important, Angie, because I know you have Ghanaian ancestry. Thank you so much for joining us, Angie.
Thank you, Dr. Charity. And it's an incredible honor to be asked to contribute and to participate on your show. And so I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Great, excellent. So it's all about you today, all about listening to you, sharing your expertise and your experience. So let's get you started. So please share with us some of your role models or mentors that influenced you early in life and throughout your public health journey.
Reflecting on this question, I think, they are both personal and professional role models. I think, growing up as a daughter of Ghanaian parents, my grandmother was a strong influence on our life, big family, care for the family. I come from a family of predominantly females. And so a lot of strong women in our lives who are in the health and healthcare field or service field. And so they were some of my earliest mentors and role models before I even knew what a mentor role model was. And I think, when I started entering the professional world, I had a number of, advisors and people who actually saw strengths and assets in me before I even recognized them myself, who mentored me, who guided me, who made connections for me, and really helped to open doors and paths of opportunity. And so I would say, when I started my work in community organizing, and understanding a little bit more about what public health looks like in the community. I had a mentor who, I still have this mentor actually, who her name is Sharon Kennard Wells. And she really, saw the strength that I brought to the team. We're really working on housing and how housing is a critical point in accessing safe and healthy housing. And that was really helpful for me. I also had mentors in public health fields. I worked at the Rhode Island Department of Health for about a decade, and I had incredible people, mainly women leaders again, who supported me. One was a woman named Anna Novais, actually also from West Africa, from Cape Verde, who supported me and promoted me and guided me and set me on a path. And we had an incredible director of health. Her name is Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott. And she was just really an empowering leader and trusted leaders and trusted them, allowed them to, speak, sometimes making mistakes. I think sometimes we don't talk about what making mistakes and what the lessons are in that. And so, from family through education and professional career, I've had a tremendous amount of women leaders who supported and mentored me along the way.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Angie. Really, really interesting. So from your experience, what would you say are the attributes that are important in determining leadership effectiveness?
I think there's several, and there are many. I think one of the things that is important to be for qualities or attributes is to be able to listen, right? Nowadays, I think we see leaders as somebody who's out in the forefront, someone who's always leading. But oftentimes, in order to be able to lead effectively, you have to listen. Oftentimes, that listening means listening to the needs of those you are serving, needs of those you are supporting. Another thing is I always say that it's always important to, as a leader, to have an attribute that you may not know it all, and being comfortable enough to say that you don't know it all, and relying on others to be able to, share what their wisdoms may be as well too. And I think that makes you a stronger leader when you can also listen and learn from others. And I think another thing is also being courageous and being bold. I think, being leadership is about taking risks, and you will be confronted with things where the situation may be uncertain. And so you have to take those bold and courageous decisions when you don't have all the decisive factors in front of you. And so listening, surrounding yourselves with people that you're able to listen, and also taking bold and courageous risks when necessary.
No, this is really interesting. I like the way you put it, being courageous, taking risk. And I think, what other life event than the pandemic to really nudge us towards taking courageous, and bold decisions. Thank you so much, Angie. Can you help us, contrast the difference and similarities maybe between leading a team internally, and, relating to others externally? How would you contrast those two roles?
I think leading internally, sometimes one leadership can be a really lonely place. And being able to develop a really trusting relationship with those you're leading internally, I think is incredible. I learned that, as you mentioned, Dr. Charity, during the pandemic. Was working at the United Way of Rhode Island at that time, and I had developed a strong relationship with our community investment team, which was primarily responsible for responding to calls. There were so many things that we didn't know during the pandemic, and responding to calls in a crisis and concerns that people had. And one of the things that strengthened us during that time is the fact that as leaders internally, we had developed a rapport, and a relationship where we can trust one another, we can work on one another. And that became critically important in the middle of a crisis, because there are so many things that were evolving, so many things that were changing, but we had established that foundational relationship and understanding that we were going to work through this together. And we did, while simultaneously caring for our own families and understandably having some of our own same concerns as professionals who are serving the community. But we united, and it's in times of crisis like a global pandemic, we really saw how that foundational internal relationship and trusting relationship allowed us to be really successful in fulfilling the mission of serving the community.
Thanks for sharing that. Really, really important. So from your experience, how have you gone about selecting people to be on your leadership team? What do you look out for?
One of the things I learned a couple of years ago, that one is I learned what my top strengths are. There's this assessment called the Clifton Strengths Finder. And, depending on who you are, you may or may not believe these. But when I took the Clifton Strengths Finder, it's an assessment, and it came up with my top 5 strengths. My strengths were connectedness, relating to people, ideation, being able to see the big picture, and being strategic. And so the benefit to that in terms of selecting leaders is that I know what strengths I bring to the table, and I love to complement those strengths with others on the team as well too. And so yes, it's okay if somebody has similar strengths on my team, but what makes a team stronger is that when you have people who have strengths that are different than yours, that can also strengthen and complement. And so I'm not a detail-oriented person who'll be looking at, I am not very like logistical, like A, B, C. Some people are really into the details and the weeds. That's not my strength. And I love it when there are others who on the team who slow me down from the bigger vision and say, okay, so what is this step and what is that step? And I think that is, critical in developing a team that is strong, is to be able to look at one, how do you complement the team, and also, how do you work, together? And so, and I also think that, having real life experience, I think sometimes, we can be in academia for a while, but having experience in the real world, working in communities, working in different, workforce, I think is incredibly helpful to have, real life world experiences that inform your academic and educational background as well too.
No, this is really, I really love what you've said. Is just so powerful. I'll tell you why. When you start out by saying, understanding what your strengths are, it's so powerful because of the perception that people have that leaders should be everything. and there should be no weakness around the leader, And so just sharing that you understand what your strengths are, and then you look for team members who complement. It's such a powerful thing. Thanks for sharing that, Angie. Moving on to another question. How do you deal with a situation where, someone is not appearing to be a good fit or just not performing well? How have you addressed it?
A situation that comes to mind is, I was leading a team a number of years ago in an organization, and there was one employee that I wasn't directly supervising, but others were supervising this employee. And there was a lot of reports about lack of motivation, not showing up on time, the traditional things that, impact performance in a work environment. And so one of the things that I did when I sat down with this individual, and it was just to get to know you, this person. What I found out from this individual is that they were an outdoors person. They really enjoyed being out in the environment. And when I looked at, this person's job specs and this person's work they were doing, there was a mismatch. They were not aligned with where their strengths were. They were not aligned with what they enjoyed to do. And so when we offered this employee the opportunity to do different things that were outside of his work scope that aligned with his strengths, we saw him blossom. We saw him. And so sometimes it is, how do we look at what value and strengths this person brings to the organization? Maybe they're in a world that doesn't align with them. Yes, understandably, sometimes there are employees or colleagues who, they're just not be a good match in general. But I also say that we spend so much time with our work colleagues that it's important to get to know the person for who they are. Understand that when they come to work, they're just bringing part of them. There may be things happening at home. Understanding some of those dynamics. How can we support you? And so, oftentimes when I say good morning and how are you doing, it's not just in passing by. I don't want just like a trite answer like good. No, I really am asking you how you're doing. And if there's things outside of work that are impacting your ability to function there, let's talk about it. How can we help and support you? Or if you feel like your skills are not matched to the job, how can we think about that as well too? And so I think being able to have these conversations, honestly, listening to colleagues that may be frustrated within their role or understanding that maybe the workplace is not a good fit. Those conversations, you get to those points of understanding by having these conversations, understanding the people that you're working with.
Well, thanks so much, Angie, for sharing that. One thing that jumps out from all you said is, being able to lead with empathy and really putting oneself in the shoes of the person who's not performing well and trying to understand their situation. Thanks so much for sharing that, Angie. So let's talk about reporting up. Recognizing that no matter how high you are, highly placed you are in an organization, you're probably still reporting up, you would be reporting up like to a board or something. So in your case, can you please share some of your experiences and best practices for reporting up?
I think for me, what's been successful is one, being open and honest and transparent in your communication, right? People, if you say, be honest with your word. If you say you're going to do something within a certain time frame, do that. And I think sometimes one of the things that I've learned over just recently is sometimes reporting up means also managing up, right? And also, working with your, people, as they say, people treat you how you allow them to treat you. And so, are there things that, hey, this doesn't work for me? How can we think about this differently? Here's how I would like to act, how I would like to proceed on this, ideal concept. What are your thoughts and values? So I think, being able to, be trustful with your word, managing up when necessary, and just really, having conversations that sometimes are difficult, but I think things that are left unsaid often sometimes harbor resentment. And, the sooner you can deal with that, the better it is for all involved as well too. And really, clearly communicating what your hopes and aspirations are as well too, and how that person who you be managing, that is managing you, can be supportive of you in your success. Because in the end, that's what we want, right? You want to be successful, and ideally, your manager would want you to be successful as well too, and support that success.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Angie, we know that, you're busy, busy, busy. Busy, busy, busy. And so when a request is made for your time, how do you decide what to say yes to and what to say no to?
So I'll have to admit, pre-pandemic, I said yes to everything, right? And, we didn't realize how busy we were, right? During the pandemic. And oftentimes it's busy just to be busy, right? And so the pandemic, the lockdown allowed us to slow down, reevaluate everything, and really understand what was really important. And so over the past 2 years, it, you know, I really prioritize my time and doing things that are important, that are valuable to me, that contribute to the greater good, or to, contribute to me or my family. And really prioritizing nothing, right? We had so much time where there was no space to do anything. And I just love it when there's space on my calendar where nothing is happening, where I can do maybe nothing, spend time with family, relax, listen to a book, because I've gotten accustomed to now we're just going to listen to books. I don't have time to read with in addition to read a doctoral program. And so, so yes, just understanding that things, the pandemic allowed me to reprioritize what was important and really understand how I can contribute in a way that is meaningful for everyone involved. And so that's, the indicator. And oftentimes, last thing I'll say on this is that, right, I recognize that it doesn't always have to be me. And I am surrounded by incredibly brilliant and capable people. And so sometimes it's no but, it's no and, right? Unfortunately, I can't do this, but I also know somebody who is incredible that who could do this. I can't serve on your board, but I know based upon this skill set, I know somebody who'd be a perfect match, and so that's been incredibly rewarding to be able to also lift others up in the process as well too, and providing them with connections and opportunity and growing their network.
No, this is really great, and I know that the listeners and the audience are just picking, bits and pieces. But let me tell you what just blew me away. Number one, helping us to understand that it's okay to do nothing. Like sometimes it's okay to do nothing, to schedule a nothing time. It's fine. And the other point you made that just really resonated is the ability to delegate. So you can say no, but, or you can say no and someone else can do this. Really powerful, Angie. Thanks for sharing those with us. Just moving on, and there's a similar question. You've answered a bit of it, but maybe you can expatiate. What do you do for self-renewal and to maintain a balance? I know you've mentioned, reading a book, time with family. You may want to also share some others.
Prioritizing wellness. You read that, exercising and finding time for yourself really helps you mentally. And, when you work out, there's really, you know the science, but you really feel good after that, right? As much as you have to drag and bring yourself to that point to get there, once you're done, you feel better about it, right? Like the endorphins really do work. And so finding space for that time to work out, because, also it is some really good me time. And then you get that natural feel good afterwards as well too. And sometimes you might look a little better in the process as well too. I also love spending time with my girlfriends, right? Laughing, and just being, as a mother, and as a wife, sometimes we're always serving and, caring for others, but just being with your friends where you can, be with each other, laugh, go out to dinner, go to the movies. That time is also rejuvenating. And then, again, I will, reiterate that having time on your calendar where you do nothing, you rest, prioritizing sleep. That's one of the things that I've been enjoying as well too. So, it's not beneath me to take a nice long afternoon nap because I can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And I really appreciated the way you put in, as a mother and a wife, you're always serving others. I think that's so critical for conversations with women in public health leadership. Being always offering service and then forgetting to just take wellness on your own and to prioritize that. So thanks for sharing that. Really, really crucial for women in public health leadership. So let's talk about the pandemic, Angie. What has the pandemic taught you about leadership?
Ooh, the pandemic taught me about leadership is that leaders don't always know the answer, and it's okay. Right? We saw that play out in public health, where the science was evolving as it literally right before our eyes. And so I saw public health leaders, really grapple with that and say, here's what we know right now. This may change tomorrow, but here's what we know right now. And kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's okay to say as a leader that you don't know. It's okay to rely on other members of your team. We realize how incredibly important epidemiologists are during the pandemic. And I think many of us were, social media epidemiologists in the middle of predicting and looking at the course of diseases. Right? We got a good time to really value those who contribute to this work. And I think the pandemic also taught us how we rely on our frontline workers, right? We saw doctors and nurses and others who really didn't have the choice to be home during a lockdown, but really, particularly in the United States, really out in the hospitals on a day in and day out as this crisis was evolving and caring for people. And so, I tip my hat off to, the leaders in public health, the leaders and the frontline workers, and in the United States as well, too. We saw a lot of what we say frontline workers, and what frontline workers, people who were in the markets, people who were farming for our foods, and what they contributed to, our work as well too. Was really how it was really enlightening to see how interconnected we all were. Right? We talk about how we rely on each other, but this whole system, we realize how much we rely on every single person, whether it be the healthcare providers, the people in the markets. We saw gas. We saw like every single person has a role, and their role is significant as well too.
No, thanks for sharing that, Angie. Thank you so much. So I know that you're more or less a health equity expert, given all the time you've spent around doing health equity work. Can you please share with us what you see as the relevance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in public health?
I think the pandemic showed the significance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and what we saw was in public health, we call it the social determinants of health, and how those drivers impact health inequalities. And so diversity, equity, inclusion, I think has become hot. It's a sexy topic nowadays. And it's really, I say it's really looking at how systemic racism and oppression impact health outcomes, right? We can call it social determinants of health. We can sort of diversity, equity, inclusion. And so we're really looking at how systemic racism impacts historically marginalized communities globally. And it's not just in the United States. We see that in other countries, particularly in Africa, and how colonization has impacted. I'm not sure if it's diversity, equity, inclusion in Africa. It's maybe it's the concept is colonialism and how that has impacted health outcomes. And so when I say diversity, equity, inclusion is really looking at how we can disrupt the systems that have perpetually impacted health outcomes across the globe. And so in the United States, it's housing and redlining and housing, and how we knew that housing was hard to be in in the lockdown. It was hard to stay home and isolate for 5 days if you were homeless, right? And there are certain communities who disproportionately impacted by that. And now, particularly for example, in Rhode Island, the unhoused population has grown dramatically as a result of rising costs. We saw it in education and educational outcomes, and how youth from urban communities were, unfortunately, they didn't have parents who could be home with them during the pandemic. And so we had 6 and 7-year-olds or younger teenagers watching over their siblings while their parents had to work on the front line, whether it be in the markets or in the hospitals. And so diversity, equity, inclusion for me is really rising. I'm glad that it's a hot topic. My hope is that there is no need for diversity, equity, inclusion because everyone is treated fairly and equally moving forward. So we don't have to be talking about how to be more inclusive and how to make sure that we're thinking about diversity. But it just is, it's built into the DNA of everything that we do.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks a lot. You're right. I mean, the pandemic has really, really amplified the discourse around DEI, and hopefully it really triggers more action around it. So we're drawing to a close. You've shared so much, and everything you've shared, Angie, has been really important, and I'm sure the audience will appreciate listening to you. But if you were to highlight 3 key points and say, look, if you don't remember anything, remember these 3 points, what would those be?
Wow. So those 3 key points, I would say one is it's okay if you're not the smartest person in the room. Most important thing is that you surround yourself with people who are brilliant as well too, and trusting those people. I would say listen to your inner voice, listen to those who are around you. I think third is continuing to surround yourself with people who will not only be your champions when you're in the room, but also be your champions when you're not in the room as well. So I think it's critically important to surround people who, we talk about mentorship, we talk about advocacy, but we don't talk about sponsorship. And I think sponsorship is what do people say and about you and for you when you're not in the room to advocate for you. I think all of us need sponsors in terms of our careers and the success of our careers. Need others who will sponsor us as well too, and make sure that you're at tables that you should be at and that can benefit and you can add value to.
Oh, thank you so much. Your parting words were so powerful, Angie, about, it's okay not to be the smartest in the room. And, sponsorship is so critical. Having champions both in the room and when you're not in the room, that's so powerful. Thank you so much for leaving us with such powerful, ideas and, things to think about. Angie, we've come to the end of this interview, and honestly, if we could, we'll ask you 200 more questions, but we can't for now. We hope when we invite you for another series, you oblige us and join us. We hope you can do that.
Thank you. I'd be absolutely honored. And thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed our chat this morning.
Thank you. Excellent. So there you have it, everyone. Thanks for joining us to listen to Angie today. And before the next conversation, be inspired and stay inspired. Thank you so much, Angie. Bye.